One out of every 4 people in sub-Saharan Africa still face food insecurity, and this is largely due to low agricultural productivity in the area.
Crop yields are 80% lower than United States average. And we have the technologies to increase productivity.
That's Trent McKnight of AgriCorps. Adoption of new technologies is something that we talk about often on the show. But in this context of the developing world, there is a model that has been proven to be effective in diffusing innovation. It's by targeting youth through school-based agricultural education.
In his 40 years of studying the diffusion of agricultural innovation in Africa, school-based agriculture education was one of the most effective interventions he had ever seen to influence adult farmers to test and adopt a new technology.
The he Trent is referring to is renowned economist Chris Udry. And joining Trent and I on today's episode is the National Executive Director of 4-H Liberia, G. Umaro Sharif.
Farmers who are going to contribute to solving food problem in school today. So investing in young people in school-based agriculture education is the best way to secure food in the world.
School-based agricultural education on today's Future of Agriculture podcast. Hello, fellow Ag Nerd. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Future of Agriculture. My name is Tim Hamrich, and every week you and I get to hear from the farmers, founders, innovators, and educators, in today's case, shaping the future of the ag industry. Today's episode, I think, is going to open up a lot of eyes. We tend to think of these youth programs, things like 4-H and FFA, as great things for the kids to be doing and not really give them much thought beyond that. Very few recognize them for the power that they have to not only develop young agricultural leaders, but also as tools for spreading ideas and technologies. And that's what today's episode is all about. And it's a personal one for me. I grew up in 4-H and then in FFA, and both organizations had profound impacts on my life and on my worldview that I still carry with me today. Then in 2012, I had the chance to join a team led by today's guest, Trent McKnight, and spend several weeks in the country of Liberia, interviewing farmers about food insecurity and farming practices. Some of that work would then go on to become Trent launching AgriCorps in 2013, that next year. That experience, though, in Liberia left a permanent impression on me and on my life. So I've known Trent for a long time, probably 25 years or so now, and I've had the chance to work with his nonprofit, AgriCorps, in various capacities over the years. In fact, Trent first appeared on this show way back on episode 27, which I posted in November of 2016. So over 8 years ago now. For those of you not familiar, 4-H and FFA, and I'm speaking in generalities here, but they are youth agricultural organizations. 4-H varies quite a bit from state to state and from country to country, but in Liberia, which is a country in sub-Saharan Africa that we're going to focus on today, they have what is known as a school-based agricultural education model. So in that way, Liberia 4-H is similar in a lot of ways to how most of us know FFA here in the U.S. It involves 3 major components. The first is classroom instruction in agriculture as part of their school curriculum. Secondly, it's leadership events and contests. And then third, it's a project outside of the classroom, kind of a hands-on type project, which in Liberia they refer to as home entrepreneurship projects, or HEPs. If that sounds like a great way to learn a lot about agriculture and develop yourself as a leader and entrepreneur, you're absolutely right. But it's also more than that. The model was intended to lower the risk of adopting new agricultural innovations, and as you're about to hear, it's very effective at doing just that. Some biographical background here. Trent McKnight is an experienced international agriculturalist, investor, and cattle rancher from rural West Texas. Trent holds bachelor's and master's degrees in agricultural economics and comparative politics from Oklahoma State University and the London School of Economics, respectively. He has held leadership positions, including national president of the Future Farmers of America. Fun fact, him and I were just 2 years apart in holding that role, and chair of the USDA Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Advisory Committee. In 2013, Trent founded AgriCorps, a nonprofit organization focused on improving school-based agricultural education in sub-Saharan Africa. Through AgriCorps, he created the International Agricultural Education Fellowship Program under the trade title of the 2018 Farm Bill and launched the movement for school-based agricultural education, which is where we're going to focus a lot of our attention here today. Also joining us, G. Umaro Sharif is the National Executive Director and co-founder of 4-H Liberia, a local non-governmental organization reviving efforts from the 1970s and 1980s when Liberia boasted over 1,000 4-H clubs. Under his leadership, 4-H Liberia has worked in hundreds of rural communities and empowered thousands of youth through school-based agricultural education and leadership development. Committed to evidence and learning, Sharif partnered with Northwestern University, Innovations for Poverty Action, and AgriCorps on the largest randomized control trial of a 4-H program in Africa involving 197 schools. Born and raised in Liberia, Sharif's life was profoundly shaped by the Liberian Civil War, during which he lived as a refugee in Sierra Leone for 5 years. He returned to Liberia after the war and graduated from the University of Liberia in 2010 with a bachelor's in accounting and public administration. This is such a fascinating conversation with Trent and Sharif about the power of school-based agricultural education. And as a bonus, you're even going to get a bit of a history episode in here as well that I'm guessing most of you don't know about. And that's exactly where we'll start, on the history of school-based agricultural education from Trent.
School-based agriculture education goes back almost, 120 years in the United States. But even predating that, we had built these land grant universities in the U.S. in the 1860s, the Morrill Land Grant Act. Lincoln signed the act and created these land grant universities to effectively create new knowledge, conduct research, and create better farming practices and agricultural technologies. The problem was that after 50 years of building up new research and new technologies and new knowledge, none of it was actually reaching the farmer. And there was a man by the name of Rufus Stimson. He was the president of what is today University of Connecticut, the land grant university in Connecticut. And he saw the importance of science and research and continuing to invest in that. But he also realized the importance of being able to take that to the farmer. And that if that science and research wasn't getting to the farmer, then what was really the point of it to begin with? So at the age of 40, he resigned as president of the university to become a high school agriculture teacher in Massachusetts to test out a theory. And that theory was home projects and school-based agriculture education. And the idea was that the university, land grant university, would develop these better agricultural technologies and methodologies. They would train the teachers in those technologies and methodologies. And these teachers would go back into the public school system that already existed, didn't need to create another institutional structure, go into the public school system. They would train students who came from farms, and these students, to practice what they had learned, would go back to their family's farm and have a home project. But the difference was that these students were using the science and technology that was coming from the university. So at the end of the season, these students would outperform their parents because they were using better science, better technology, a hybrid corn variety, for instance. And they would outproduce their parents. And the parents wanted to know at the end of the season, how did little Johnny outperform me? I've been farming for 20 years. Little Johnny just started, and this is his high school project. And they would begin to adopt those same technologies and methodologies. And this system became federalized through the Smith-Hughes National Vocational Education Act of 1917 or 18, and thus became vocational agriculture and agricultural education.
So this model then originated in the U.S., and it would seem to me from hearing you talk about that, it's like, okay, yeah, back in those days, we were sort of an agrarian-focused society, and that made a lot of sense. So why didn't that spread to other agrarian societies, or did it?
It did, actually. So there were kind of three waves of agricultural education kind of spreading outside of the United States. The first wave kind of came in the pre-war years in the 20s and the 30s. And it was really spread from people who had come to the United States to study. So these typically would have been elites who would have come to the United States and maybe actually went to the University of Nebraska and Lincoln and studied something there, and then they went back and carried these ideas with them. So the first wave of spreading, agriculture education types of programs around the world was from foreign students who had come to the U.S. and then went back to their countries to start them. The second wave of kind of diffusion of this idea came post World War II. One of the most kind of famous examples was a former vocational agriculture teacher who was assigned to General MacArthur in Japan during Reconstruction. And he recognized the need for sustainable agriculture if Japan was going to rebuild their society after the war and be a peaceful nation. And so helped to create a vocational agricultural education program there, which became the Future Farmers of Japan. But it wasn't just limited to Japan. We began to invest in these types of programs in the 50s and the 60s, and there were a tremendous number. USAID was investing in these, the State Department and the Department of Defense were all investing in these types of programs in the post-World War II years. And then all that kind of went away in the 80s and 90s. And the third wave really started probably with the legislation of the Feed the Future Act that President Obama signed around 2009 or 10. And that was probably the later wave, which is kind of where we are today.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people, at least here in the U.S., that know about 4-H and FFA think, oh, that's a good club for kids to be in. That's a good thing for kids to do. Probably teaches them good skills, and how nice that the kids are doing that. Not a lot of people, I think, are making this connection that it actually was intended to be a way for new ideas and technologies to sort of like make their way into the broader society, specifically with farmers. Has that been a barrier for you through your work with AgriCorps and the work you're trying to do, is like getting people to see beyond just what they know of with these organizations or clubs?
4-H and FFA have evolved over the last 100 years in the United States to meet exactly, where we are and the needs of American agriculture and the needs of our society in a, more modern evolution. But their original creation was really a behavioral change model to reach farmers who were resistant to change. And there's a number of different reasons. It's not just farmers who are resistant to change. The older we get, the more resistant we are to change, and the more risk averse we become for a number of really important reasons. And there were some smart people who figured out that one of the ways to reach adults, and particularly farmers, was through their children, and that we could de-risk these innovations. We could de-risk a hybrid corn variety in Iowa by giving a pail of hybrid corn seed to a 12-year-old 4-H'er to go back and get his father to give him 1 acre of land and to plant it exactly like the extension agent told him to. And then that kid would certainly outproduce his father because he was using hybrid corn. And then the next year, the Pioneer seed reps came and sold that hybrid corn to those farmers.
Well, I want to get into kind of why this is relevant now, right? The why now question. But first, I want to bring Sharif in here. Maybe if you don't mind, Sharif, just for the audience that knows nothing about Liberia, they've never been to, sub-Saharan Africa at all. How do you introduce somebody to the country of Liberia who's never been there? What would you tell them?
So Liberia is located on the west coast of Africa, is between Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Ivory Coast. Liberia was founded in 1847 by 3 slaves from the United States who came and founded Liberia as a nation. The major language we speak in Liberia, official language, is English. We have other traditional language, 16 other tribes, but the official language that we speak in Liberia is English. And
how would you describe the farming there? What What are farmers growing, and what's the kind of the farm economy look like?
Okay, so for Liberia, farmer plants rice. So rice is our staple food, but the rice that we plant, it cannot even feed the farmers. So most of our rice is imported from overseas, either China, India, Pakistan. We also have cassava. So the second staple food is cassava, and even the cassava, it is not still enough. And most of the farmers plant using traditional ways of farming. So that is why 4-H also is created to change the mindset of farmers so they can plant crops using improved agricultural activities so that they can be able to yield more food.
And Trent, you led an expedition to Liberia that I was on in 2012, I think it was. And I know you felt drawn to the country and to the region for a long time. Can you maybe talk about, for you, why this work is kind of so important to you to take this model that you grew up in, that you're a part of here in the U.S., and see if there was a way to help promote it in those other countries?
After conducting research that you were part of, Tim, and interviewing these 400 smallholder farmers and seeing these, again, positive correlations between agricultural education and food security, and also, recognizing my own background in agricultural education and connections to organizations like FFA or 4-H and the extension system in the United States and agricultural education at large. I was kind of caught in one of those places. Well, if not me, then whom? And if not now, then when? I was uniquely placed. I saw the problem. I saw the solution only because I knew that we had the same problem 100 years ago in America, and we had a solution to this problem 100 years ago. And I was still connected to this solution of agricultural education and started to bring my various connections together to promote school-based agriculture education, which had largely been forgotten in development. I talked about these different waves. In the 50s and 60s, the US government had invested in school-based agriculture education in countries around the world, but all that investment was really lost. And so was the knowledge of these types of programs. And so if we were going to reestablish them, there weren't very many people who were from rural America who grew up in agriculture education who were doing agriculture development anymore. And so found this opportunity and pursued it.
Well, you also have a background in economics, right? You studied ag economics at Oklahoma State. You did your master's at London School of Economics. Talk to us about kind of like the modern economic principles. I think in your TED Talk, you mentioned like a modern theory of behavioral economics by a Nobel Prize winning economist that kind of figures into all this too. So talk to us about where the school-based agriculture education model intersects with these really modern economics ideas.
So, originally school-based agriculture education was following this behavioral economics model. They just didn't develop the behavioral economics model until 1979. Kahneman and Tversky, who won the Nobel Prize in economics for prospect theory and creating an entire field of behavioral economics, which suggests that people don't just make decisions because it's in their economic best interest. Behavioral economics views people holistically as a human being, not just as a little economic widget who has a lot of different interests and a lot of different temptations and a lot of different risk factors that go into their decision-making, thought process. And so behavioral economics takes all that into account and finds ways to nudge individuals to make better decisions. And school-based agriculture education is nothing but a series of nudges that are not really economic in their process, but they lead to an economic outcome. So you nudge a student to participate in 4-H, and you do that through leadership activities. They get excited about leadership contests and about making money. But one of the requirements is they also have to have this home project where their parents are seeing the benefits of these improved methodologies and technologies. So you're nudging the student through leadership activities and competitions. They get excited about their home project. Their parents then, who think that their kids are just doing a school project, but the kids outproduce the parents. So now the parents are really interested. And when that happens, they kind of slowly begin to ask questions. How did this happen? They begin to observe. They begin to ask maybe the agriculture teacher or the extension agent what was happening, and they begin to adopt those same technologies. If it were just pure economics, you would be able to go and logically tell the farmer, if you adopt this seed technology, it will double your yield. But there's a variety of reasons why that farmer doesn't do that. That is based on their reference point of what they know, their status quo. So behavioral economics, behavioral change theory is one of the ways to reach them and to nudge them to make better choices.
And Sharif, this isn't just theoretical, right? You've seen this happen time and again in 4-H Liberia. Would you mind, if you can, just share an example of how this whole model works, where you've seen this work from beginning to end with the student, and then it kind of transferring to the parent and the livelihood of the family?
Yeah, and thank you very much. And that is extremely helpful question. But let me just give you an example. There are a lot of positive impact of school-based agricultural education in Liberia. Like, take, for example, one of our students, his name is Charles. In Liberia, students have the mindset that agriculture is a peasant job. They don't want to do it, right? So Charles, what he did was that he saw 4-H as an opportunity. He planted his vegetable garden, and then when his vegetables were ready, he raised 3,000 Liberian dollars from all of his vegetable production. And then what he do is that he reinvested that money into cassava production using improved method that he learned from the school, because he learned the activities from the school and he has his HEP. So he put it into practice. Now, when he sold the cassava, fund portion of the money from his farm, he used it to buy a bicycle. And in Liberia, in rural communities, it is not easy to see a young person having a bicycle. So that changed the mindset of the youth that agriculture is a profitable venture. And Charles never just stopped there. Charles also, he taught other farmers on improved agriculture activities, and 4 of those farmers have adapted his improved method on how to plant cassava using mound and ridges, and they are doing well, and it's changed their mindset of agriculture.
One of the reasons why we're focused on youth is because youth are a great example of early adopters in a community. If I had a hybrid corn seed that I tell you, it's my word against yours, that can double your yield, who is more likely to adopt that corn seed, that new hybrid corn seed? A 13-year-old who is studying agriculture in junior high school, or a smallholder farmer and father of 8 children who produced just enough food last year to feed all of his children and is very risk averse? It's that 13-year-old, because she doesn't have anything to lose. That smallholder farmer hears what you say. Yeah, this could be better. I could double my yields, but what if it doesn't work? And if it doesn't work, then which one of my children am I not going to feed? The risk assessment between the two is entirely different. So if we can start with young people who have a different risk profile than a smallholder farmer and father of 8, then we can use that 13-year-old as an early adopter. And then we can de-risk that same innovation for the adult that makes it easier for them to adopt, because we have de-risked it for them based on their risk profile and their reference point and their status quo.
Absolutely. And what we're talking about here is a model for behavior change. And I think we could probably spend the full hour just sharing examples that each of you have both seen of this working. But you also felt the need to kind of get some data behind this too, right? And you engaged in this study. Can you just talk about what led to the study and what the results were? Because it was, even for somebody who already believed in it, myself, it's pretty impressive.
So we had been talking about, this model for some time, and people would hear it and say, "Oh, that's great. You work with kids in West Africa. That's great. Good for you." But I could never really get people to see what I was seeing on the ground. And so I recognized that we needed to have really robust, rigorous evidence. So I approached a man named Chris Utery, who is the former chair of economics at Yale and the founder of the Global Poverty Research Lab at Northwestern University. He's within the top 1% of the most cited economists in the world, and he has spent his career studying the diffusion of agricultural innovation in sub-Saharan Africa. So he was exactly the right person that we needed. And he was interested in creating a randomized controlled trial to measure the efficacy of this model on both youth development and technology adoption. We had 100 control communities and 100 treatment communities in Liberia. Funding came from USAID, the French Development Agency, the National Science Foundation, all supported this work. And what we found was, after a 4-year impact evaluation, is that it's almost 3 times more effective to shift the behavior of adult farmers through school-based agricultural education than through traditional extension methodologies and strategies that are targeting only adults. In other words, it's almost 3 times more effective to reach an adult through their children than it is by going directly to the adult. And in Chris's own assessment, he said that in his 40 years of studying the diffusion of agricultural innovation in Africa, school-based agriculture education was one of the most effective interventions he had ever seen to influence adult farmers to test and adopt a new technology.
And we should mention here, I'm sure people listening already kind of deduce this, but while 4-H is not school-based in the U.S., it is in other places like Liberia. It is school-based. In the U.S., FFA is school-based, but 4-H is not. It's kind of an extracurricular club outside of school. But is that true in a lot of other countries, or is Liberia unique in that way?
Well, even the United States is unique because 4-H is at the state level in the United States. In Georgia, 4-H is more school-based. So even across the United States, 4-H looks different in every state. And the same is true, globally. In Liberia, it's kind of a hybrid model because we are working with extension and schools. So we have an extension agent, or also what we call a field officer, who is responsible for about 12 to 15 schools that they are working with. And then those schools have a teacher who is teaching the students. In Liberia, let's talk about extension for a little bit. Extension is quite dysfunctional in Liberia. It's quite dysfunctional most places around the world because it's a very expensive institution. And in Liberia, there is one extension agent per 30,000 farmers. I mean, if you are an extension agent, you're responsible for 30,000 farmers, and you only have a motorbike and you don't even have a budget to operate that motorbike. Where do you even start? So they give up before they even start because the problem is so daunting. But if we can break that down and show that rather than one extension agent per 30,000 farmers, and say, let's do one extension agent per 25 schools. And each one of those schools is in a community of 800 or 1,000 people. You're now reaching, almost 25,000 farmers just by restructuring the way in which we think about extension. And we have, the extension agent who's working with the teachers who are working with the students. The students are operating a school demonstration farm. And this school demonstration farm is not only a laboratory for learning, it's also an extension demonstration farm demonstrating better farming practices and technologies to the community, to the farmers at large. It just happens to be managed by the kids at the school. So it's also, in addition to this being an education model, it's also a different extension model that leverages limited resources to be able to create greater impact.
So cool. And Sharif, you've been doing this for almost 20 years now with 4-H Liberia. What part of this gets you most excited? What are you seeing out there that really gets you, passionate about continuing on this work?
What gets me more motivated is the transformation is making, the impact is making on young people, especially girls, an impact on all level of people, young people. I just want to give example on girls. It helped girls to stay in school, right? Like take for example, one of our students, she from a poor community. Her parent never had money to send her to school, and she joined 4-H, and then she participated in a public speaking event contest. She represented her school in Monrovia, and then she won the trophy. And then she went back. Her teacher was very proud of her, and her school principal, everyone in her community was so proud of her. So now she got a scholarship, allowing her to stay in school. Now she never dropped from school. She won the scholarship, and now she is in school. So it helped young people, girls, to remain in school. In Liberia, there are a lot of dropout rate for young girls in school, but 4-H is contributing for to have girls remain in school.
Yeah, I'm the product of school-based ag education. I attribute a lot of my life and career decisions to what I experienced there, but I don't think until maybe even right now that I truly appreciate the interdependence of the leadership aspect to the agriculture project aspect. Because hearing you guys talk, this girl who wins this contest and come back, how much better is she equipped to diffuse innovation because of her communication skills? You're basically removing the barrier of like, yeah, you can do it, but can you help other people do it? Because you're improving sort of the leadership and communication skills. That should have been obvious to me a long time ago, but I don't know that I really ever appreciated it until maybe this moment.
So this girl, Deba, her name is Deba Gonti, the little girl I'm talking about. Her name is Deba Gonti. So what she did was that because of what she learned, she took leadership step, right, by training other young people in her school, preparing them for the public speaking contest. And then she became a mentor. And she is at the age of 13. And other young people started looking at her as a mentor. She started mentoring them for the national public speaking contest.
And even in the United States, one of the oldest 4-H competitions is called the Method Demonstration Competition. And it is training kids to teach a particular method, how to do something. And 4-H Liberia uses that same competition as well. How to create a compost pile, how to create a measuring tool to measure the spacing between your plant, how to, do a seed germination test. And so we're training students in these transferable life skills, leadership skills like public speaking, but they're also learning how to train others in better, technologies and methodologies.
It's incredible. Well, I want to talk about kind of where this goes from here. We've got all these amazing success stories that you guys have been sharing. We've got the data now. How do we get this, implemented at a larger and larger scale so that the students and the local farmers and their families can all benefit from this? What's next toward that end?
So what we are planning to do right now, we want to have 4-H structure within the government system. We know very well that 4-H as an NGO is challenging, but if we have 4-H part of the extension service in Liberia, where it is recognized by the Ministry of Agriculture and be part of the system, we want to reach out more schools. So what we want to do now is in Liberia, we want to have in the next 5 years, we want to reach up to 600 schools. We want to reach out to more communities that do not have 4-H. So right now we are working along with our partners. We are working along with the government, because as an organization, we cannot just sit and come up with plan. We must come up with plan based on what government need, and government should be part of that planning process. So we are working along with government to see how 4-H also can be part of the extension services, because they have seen what 4-H is capable of doing. 4-H is a cost-effective way of delivering agriculture extension services within the community.
And in addition to scaling up school-based ag education in Liberia into 600 schools. AgriCorps has just launched the movement for school-based agricultural education, and we are using this as a platform to work with global and local partners to scale up this evidence-based model that we have refined in Liberia across sub-Saharan Africa. And our goal is to reach 300,000 young people by 2030 and even more beyond that. But we need to continue to build evidence. We have our proof of concept, but there's still more learning that we want to do. We want to transform policy, just as Sharif was talking about. We want to work with local governments like the Liberian government so they can embed school-based agriculture education and extension within their system. Catalyze funds. We need funds from private donors, individual donors, as well as development organizations and multilateral institutions. And I'll say, there's a reorganization right now of the way that the United States does foreign aid and development. And I think that a restructure is definitely needed. But I will also say that it is important that the United States continue to invest in the soft power of foreign aid and development, to invest in programs such as 4-H in Liberia that benefits the U.S. taxpayer and our government in so many different ways. So we want to continue to catalyze funds for these types of programs, and then strengthen capacity for organizations such as 4-H in Liberia, but also in other countries across the region.
And Trent, how can people get involved in that? This story is inspiring, and I think there's going to be some listeners that are ready to do something, but not having a clue what to do. What does that look like? What's an easy action step that could be the next step for them?
So one easy thing is to go to our website, sbae.org. It's for school-based agricultural education. So www.sbae.org. And on there, you can find a link to give. You can find a link to sign up for more information. There are also volunteer opportunities for those who are coming out of college with a degree in agriculture. There's a program called the International Agricultural Education Fellowship Program. Right now, it's being administered by Texas A&M University in Ghana and being administered by the University of Missouri in Mexico. And these programs are year-long fellowships for early career professionals to serve as an agriculture teacher, agriculture extension agent, working with 4-H programs, 4-H type programs in these countries. So if you really want to dig in and do this for a year, those are some opportunities for you. But right now, what we really need is just a movement. A lot of people who know what this is like, sharing this with others, and funds. Always more funding.
Absolutely. Well, I want to give both of you guys a chance for kind of a final word here before we wrap up. And Sharif, maybe we'll start with you. Anything you'd like to either add to the recording here or emphasize before we wrap up?
Yeah. Research shows that Africa population going to double by the year 2050. Currently, the population we have in Africa is 1.3 billion people, and that amount of number going to double. And when that is double by 2050, what people in Africa and the rest of the world will need is food. So farmers who going to contribute to solving food problem in school today. So investing in young people in school-based agriculture education is the best way to secure the future and helping to secure food in the world. So I just encourage everyone to just invest in school-based agriculture education program.
Very well put. Thank you. Yeah. And Trent?
Yeah, I think Sharif said it well there. 1 out of 4 individuals in sub-Saharan Africa faces food insecurity. This is mainly driven because of low agricultural productivity. Crop yields are 80% lower than United States average, to put that into perspective. And we have the technologies to increase productivity. The challenge remains in adoption of these technologies. At the same time, there is what's known as the youth bulge. 40% of the population of the region is under the age of 15. Sub-Saharan Africa is is home of the world's youngest demographic, and that's only going to continue to grow. And you can imagine all of the hot button political issues that are touched by a growing youth population where we don't solve problems for economic and civil stability. School-based agriculture education is the perfect solution to come in and harness the power of these young people, of this growing population, not only to equip them with the skills for future jobs and employment, but also to equip them with the skills and knowledge to implement and expand innovative agricultural practices and technologies that can boost productivity for smallholder farmers and solve the food insecurity challenges and create a stable economy and region for the years to come.
What an inspiring story. Thank you very much to Trent McKnight and G. Umaro Sharif for being on the show. I'm going to leave you with a variety of links in the show notes if you'd like to learn more, including a link to Trent's TEDx talk, which I highly recommend, as well as to 4-H Liberia and the website for the Movement for School-Based Agricultural Education. I continue to be inspired by this work, and I just think it's critical for the future of agriculture. Thanks again to those guys, and thank you for your time and attention. I do not take it lightly. I'll be back next week with another story of ag innovation.